Hi folks, Chris White here, and today I'm going to give you a tour of the new and improved Prefect Cloud user interface. To get to your team's user interface, simply navigate to cloud.prefect.io, where you'll be presented with a login screen similar to this one. If it's your first time logging in, you're going to want to come down here and click this sign up button, and that'll allow you to create an account. When you do that for the first time, you'll be walked through a series of steps allowing you to configure your tier of service, including our completely free scheduler tier. Since I've already done that, I've gone ahead and typed in my username and password right here, and so I'm going to hit continue to log in. Let's now imagine that I'm a data engineer waking up with my morning coffee, and I'm logging in to check on the status of all of the workflows that I monitor for my team. So the first thing that I'm presented with is Prefect Cloud's dashboard screen. Now the goal of this page is to log in, see a bunch of green, verify that everything is running on time, and then log out and continue with your day. As we all know though, every now and then an error is going to arise. And so the second order goal is we can quickly identify what sort of error happened, how we can fix it, and get our workflows back up and running as quickly as possible. So before we dig into this error message that we see right here in the middle, let's look at some of these other tiles that we've got. So we've got a summary tile so we can see how many flow runs that we've run in the past 24 hours. All of these tiles have time filters that allow us to expand and contract the time interval that we're looking at. The error tile surfaces any error logs that come from any of your flow runs in the past 24 hours. This upcoming runs tile is a really important one. This tile shows us all of our scheduled work that we have, and if anything happens to be running late, it will alert us and turn red. Another really important tile is this agents tile. So we can see one agent is querying cloud for flow runs. So if we click view details, here we now have the agent dashboard screen. So agents are really the workhorse of Prefect Cloud. They're responsible for polling cloud, looking for scheduled work, and anytime work is found, the agent's responsible for submitting that flow for execution in the platform on which the agent's running. So you can have as many agents as you want, deployed across as many platforms and computing environments as you want. In our case here, we've only got one agent running. This agent happens to be running inside an internal Kubernetes cluster, and we can see that it is actively polling for work. So if this agent stopped polling for work for any reason, this tile would first turn yellow and then eventually turn red to indicate to us that something might be wrong that we want to look into. So if we click back to our main dashboard screen, there's one other feature of the screen that I'd like to call out. So up here in the top right, we can see this All Projects drop-down menu. So projects in Prefect Cloud are essentially directory structures for your workflows. They allow you to organize your work into meaningful groups, and then you can filter the various UI screens by these project groups. So in our case, we have two projects, ETL backup flows and utility flows. So let's filter to our ETL backup flows and see what happens. So we can see here that when we perform this filter, we're presented with a very different view of the world. All of the flows in this particular project have actually failed in the past 24 hours. So this is in stark contrast to the view we were just looking at, where everything looked a little bit more cheery. We can check over here and we see that we do have some scheduled work still. So now that we've kind of taken a tour of the dashboard, let's actually click into this error and see if we can figure out what went wrong here. So when we click in, we're taken immediately to the error log that was referenced on the dashboard, and we can see a traceback here. So if we take a moment and kind of look into this traceback, we see value error, table does not exist, user. So for some reason, some piece of this flow is referencing a table that it couldn't actually connect to. So to give you a little bit of context for this particular flow, let's actually take a step back and look at the schematic for this flow. So in Prefect Cloud, schematics are essentially live updating views of your task run dependencies and their latest states. So in our particular case, we can see that this flow run failed. Most of the tasks that we're supposed to run actually failed, except for this first one. Now this first one has this capital P next to its name. So that designates prefect parameters. Parameters are special types of prefect tasks whose return value can actually be overwritten at runtime. So each time we kick off a run of this flow, we can provide a different value for this parameter. In fact, we can actually change the value of this parameter based on the schedule of the flow itself. So in our particular case, this parameter is called table name, and it actually defaults to a value of user. So this is where the table that the extract task was referencing comes from. So we can see here when we click extract, unexpected error, table does not exist, user. So this was the particular task that failed and caused cascading failures down to the other tasks. These tasks are actually in what we call a trigger failed state, which means that they never even ran. The conditions for them running actually failed. So now that we've identified the problem, the next thing that we probably would do is talk to relevant stakeholders and figure out why is this table that we've been referencing, this user table, no longer exist. And let's say that we find out that the user table was actually renamed to a user name table. So all we really need to do is kick off another run of this workflow, pointing at the right table name, and then we should be good to go. So we can do all of that from the Prefect Cloud UI. So if we click back here to the daily ETL flow, we can see up here in the top right or right here in this tab that there's a run flow option. So when we click to that, we're presented with one of these screens where we can configure a few different things. So first off, we can provide new values for all of the parameters in this flow. So in our case, we're going to override the default of user and actually provide username for the value here. We can also provide a flow run name. And so this name is purely a convenience and it allows us to search for it later or just identify it in the logs. So in our case, let's say hotfix for table name. Now we hit this run button and we can see that it has been placed in a scheduled state. So let's click over here to the schematic and let's see if we can watch these tasks go through their state transition. So right now everything's in a pending state represented by this light blue. And we can see that the flow run state here is submitted. So it's now running. And we can see the extract task did in fact succeed, which is what we expected to happen. And so it looks like the other tasks are also succeeding, so awesome. So our flow run is now in a successful state. We have fixed the issue. So we will probably need to revisit our code to change the default value of the parameter, but at least we know that our data is now fresh. So there's one other bookkeeping thing that I want to show you. So if we click back to this daily ETL, we can see that when we go to the dashboard or the flow page, we're presented with this bright red bar that something went wrong. Presumably what we might want to do is kind of remove that from these views. So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to click into the different runs. So we can see here that the flow run name that we provided, hotfix for table name, we can identify that. So this other flow, the failed one, we're going to click in here. And we're actually going to go up here to the top right and we're going to mark this into a different state other than failed. So let's just put it into a finished state. So we're not saying too much. It didn't necessarily succeed, but we kind of want to remove it from consideration since we did resolve the issue. Issue resolved. Hit continue. And now we can see that at least some of that red disappears from our view, and so we won't necessarily be shocked the next time we log into the UI. So now that we've seen how you can interact with flows in the Prefect Cloud UI, there are a few other screens that are worth calling out before we wrap up this tour. So if you click this icon in the top left of the menu, you're presented with a few other options here. So one thing that we haven't really talked about is everything that we're seeing in the UI is actually driven by a GraphQL API that Prefect Cloud exposes to you as a user. So to make that API even more accessible, we've actually created a built-in GraphQL client right into the UI. So using this client, you can query our API, you can perform mutations, and do anything that you might expect with a standard GraphQL client. Moving along, there are a few other management screens that are worth calling out. So the Teams screen and the user screens. So for Teams, you can control your team profile, such as your team name, the URL slug. You can invite new members if your plan allows for that. So there are a few different member types that are worth mentioning. So there's an administrator who can basically perform any action in the UI. There are users who can deploy new workflows and change the state of workflows, but they can't necessarily invite new users. And there's also a read-only role that allows people to visit the UI but not actually interact with anything directly. So you can also manage your projects, all of your different flow version groups, and create new tokens, and also, of course, manage your billing from here. Your user management screen allows you to do things such as update your name. You can also change the time zone that the UI presents all times in. So I have my UI configured to always present in my local time zone, but you can configure this, for example, to UTC or whatever your preference happens to be. And last but not least, when you first get up and running with Prefect Cloud, having tutorials is always helpful. So we've created a few interactive tutorials that hopefully help you get up and running quicker. If you've got any other questions, of course, you should always feel free to visit our documentation, and you always have a direct line to us either through this support channel right here or through our very active Slack channel. Hope to see you there.